So yeah, I think Pombon is going to stand up. It's going to be bipedal. And the reason why I think that is because when you have fire starters, if the fire element isn't prominent at the start, it's prominent at the end. And based on Pombon's details, it says the area below its throat glows faintly from the heat generating organ within its lungs. This Pokemon is guileless and friendly. So from that, the flame organ in its lungs is probably going to be a major focus of its design. So when you're trying to show off the chest where the lungs lie, the best way to do that, in my opinion, would be to have it stand up on its hind legs and be more humanoid. Therefore, you can make the chest more barrel as it evolves. So the final evolution is probably going to be a very broad-chested design. Most likely a big dog humanoid. I keep coming back to the thought of those really big dog humanoid characters from Undertale, specifically the one in all the armor. I forgot its name, but I think it's going to look something like that. Now, in terms of theming, I had a very interesting thought. Okay, so in Pokemon, when it comes to the starters, we have had one repetition of theming throughout the generations, and that is between generations 4 and generations 5. So in generation 4, we have Infernape. Infernape, of course, is based off of some Wukong from Journey to the West. Then in generation 5, we have Emboar. Emboar most likely is based off of Pigsy from the same fable. So taking that into consideration, I think Pombon is going to be the other half of Incineroar. Because you see, Incineroar is a heel wrestler. So in wrestling, the heel character is the bad guy. So if he's the bad guy, you naturally need a good guy. So I think Pombon is going to be the face wrestler equivalent to Incineroar's heel wrestler persona. And I think a big hint to this is in its description. They say that this Pokemon is guileless and friendly, which means it's gullible, it's good-hearted, it isn't up to any underhanded tactics. However, with Incineroar being a dark type, the entire persona of the dark type is that they are full of guile, they are tricksters, they play underhanded dirty tricks. So that's why it seems like he and Incineroar are polar opposites. So while he wrestles and fights fairly, Incineroar simply does not. While the crowd praises Pombon or the final evolution of Pombon, they would boo Incineroar. So that's what I think we're going to go for in the future. Pombon is going to be the face wrestling equivalent to Incineroar's heel wrestling persona. Now, when talking about the secondary typing of Pombon's final evolution, I think we could either go fighting or fairy. Fighting would be very typical as we have had many firefighting types that are starters, which I mean, for the theming, it makes sense. I just think it's a little boring, but not totally impractical. However, if we're talking about something that we haven't had before, I think Fairy could also be a very good secondary typing for the final evolution of Pombon. Because if they're aiming for Pombon to be a face wrestler, I could see it being the paragon of optimism and positivity. And optimism and positivity are more so aligned with the aspects of being a fairy type as opposed to being a fighting type, because a fighting type is more aligned with just being a warrior. However, Pombon is supposed to be a promotional figure. It's supposed to inspire children, be the people's champion, and move merchandise, which is a very meta take because, of course, Pokemon move merchandise, but I'm saying in a more of a in-universe kind of way. So with that being said, I could actually see them being even more meta in that aspect and try to make Pombon the tastemaker of this generation. Meaning this is the Pokemon that they push, this is the Pokemon in the games that gets the broken ability, etc., etc. Not unlike Meowscarada of Gen 9 or, say, Incineroar of Gen 7 or even Greninja of Gen 6. So I think it's very possible that this is the Pokemon out of the 3 starters that they push to represent the generation. Now, with that being said too, there's also a possibility that they push this rivalry if Pombon's final evolution comes to Smash, because it's very, very easy to say, oh, we're setting up this big wrestling event and we have Incineroar, the champion, and here comes a new challenger, and then you have this big dog man come out and he challenges Incineroar for the belt or what have you. So that's what I think is possible for Pombon in the future. Now, to break down what I think the final design will be, I do think we're going to get a very happy-go-lucky version of the Big Bad Wolf, who is a face wrestler. So it'll be a anthropomorphic dog character that will have this big barrel chest to show off its big glowing lungs, and its body type might be similar or perhaps the polar opposite to Incineroar, meaning perhaps instead of big arms, it has like very developed legs, perhaps. Not too sure on that, but I think either way, it's going to be anthropomorphic, and it will perhaps be a face equivalent to Incineroar's healed persona. And with that being said, I'm very excited to see what happens, but stay rosy.